I do think it's kind of bad when I start off ready to disagree with an article before it even starts. But I'm willing to be wrong. We're going to go in there with an open mind. I just simply feel like I don't agree with this at all. I do really like how he frames it, though. Senior devs aren't faster. They're just dodging problems you're forced to solve. I love that name of that because I really hope that this is actually a part of, I hope we get a lot of the same stuff here. All right, experts have it easy. Something that's painfully understudied is how experts are more efficient than novices while achieving better results. I say understudied and not unstudied, because it's common knowledge that charging people for their time results in experts being paid less since they work faster, which is why experts charge more for their time. This effect is understudied in the impact it has on novices entering the field. A novice will start out being woefully inefficient, putting in incredible amounts of effort and running through all number of mental hoops in order to maintain the growing pile of unmaintainable abstractions they've developed. Okay? Yeah, that's actually a really great thing, though, right? I mean, I once built a game. Yes, it was kind of like one of those shooting flying airplane games when I was much younger with X and A. I had something like 7 to 10 levels of inheritance for every object. You know what I learned? Stop doing that, right? Like, it was great for me. It was great. Like, if I wouldn't have done that, honestly, if I wouldn't have made such a shitty architecture, I would have literally never learned why inheritance sucks, or at least that level of inheritance sucks. Like, that's the thing, is that people forget that failing miserably is in fact a huge benefit. I lost all of my money in doing a startup. I wasted 2 years of my time in an utterly failed startup. I started it, steered the ship straight into the ground, absolutely was the worst. But you know what? I still look back on that time as being one of the single most valuable times of my life, and I pretty much direct all of my success to that one thing. An expert doesn't have to jump through these hoops. Well, no, not true. An expert jumped through these hoops. Remember that. It's inappropriate to say that an expert doesn't jump through these hoops. Experts jumped through these hoops, and some of them jumped through the hoops for a decade. Some of them only jumped through the hoops for a couple years because they understood. Like, you start to understand these things. You make the hoops, you jump through the hoops. They can more clearly see the actual problem at hand and more efficiently put their time and effort towards making progress against the problem. In contrast, novices will spend more time battling problems they've created for themselves. Let's explore the idea by looking at 2 characters entrapped in the maze and how they go about escaping. Deal. By the way, I know the writers out here, careful on the YouTube transition, lines. That's like an old YouTube transitions. Okay, now let's do this. I think modern things is changed a little bit in how people do speaking. All right, stuck in the maze, expert versus novice. Imagine a world-class navigator being set in a maze. They come well prepared with a compass and paper and have previously escaped some of the most dastardly mazes designed by man. Also, imagine yourself. You're a novice in this scenario. You didn't realize you were being thrown into a maze. You didn't even know if the goal is to get out or find the center. As you go deeper and deeper into the maze, you realize that you're hopelessly lost. Well, if you would have followed the right-hand wall rule, you wouldn't be lost, dummy. Okay? Through the miracle of literary convenience, your expert friend calls you up and offers you advice. As soon as you start, keep track of where you've been using a ball of twine. It'll help you keep track of the decisions you make. You didn't realize the criticality of feline playthings, and so you didn't bring a ball of twine. I think, is that a reference to Git? Is that a reference to making sure your code is at least in a suppository of some sort? You also don't remember where you started. You ask your expert friend for advice on what to do, and they respond, "Oh, I've got no idea. I never go anywhere without my ball of twine." You just shouldn't have got yourself into this mess in the first place. Friends. See, this is why nobody has friends in the modern world anymore, okay? This is what happened. Your friends, when you needed help, talked about how they already had all their stuff prepared and that you're the idiot and now you don't have any friends, okay? Classic. That's that. Some of the trickiest tangles I've tackled haven't been because the core problem is difficult, but rather because I was helping someone with less experience, and they spend several hours getting themselves more and more tied up before asking for help. They've made the wrong decision, which maybe solved their short-term problems, but shot them in the foot in the long term. This bad decision made others' bad decisions more likely until they were helplessly stuck in the trap of their own making. Again, I think this is a good thing, though, right? At least for me personally, I do not learn. I'm not a wise man, right? There's this whole idea that, oh, hey, you're welcome for the phone notification. But there's this idea that wisdom there's two types of people that earn wisdom. Well, there's technically three types of people. The first type of person earns wisdom by seeing someone else's failure and is able to go, oh, I shouldn't do this because I can see that other people have failed due to this. There's another set of people that when they read about stuff or they even just observe it in text, or I mean, this is the same. Sorry, that was the first person. The first person is like they read in text or they see other people and they can learn from it. I've never been that person. The second person is somebody with whom fails themselves. Even after hearing that this is a failure, they themselves experience the failure and thus it makes them better. It makes them learn from their own mistakes. That's me. I'm that guy. I've always been someone that learns maybe a couple times from the mistakes. Then the third type of person is someone who does not learn from their mistakes. Luckily, I've been that third person quite a few times as well, but I'm mostly the second person. I'm almost exclusively never the first person, right? The first, like, I think TJ is the first person. I think TJ can read things and realize that they're wrong and then somehow apply it, which I don't understand. I don't learn from my mistakes. I keep watching. I'm the second person. I think most people are the second person, second or third person. Often this trap is far trickier than anything an expert would let themselves get into. Novices, on the other hand, can easily make a sequence of bad decisions that result in an ever-increasing cost of solving the problem at hand. Not only are you lost in a maze without your twine, but you also went in a mysterious cave that looked kind of interesting at first, and now you're lost in the dark. Meanwhile, the world-class expert is happily skipping through the warm, sunny parts of the maze because they knew that cave would eventually lead to a dead end. Also, sometimes that's one thing that I think makes an expert, is that an expert can walk into a cave and spend some amount of time in a cave and then realize that every part of this cave, if you keep on descending, gets worse and worse and worse, and they know when to back out, which I think is a really hard skill to learn, is knowing when to back up. It's actually really, really, really hard to do. And knowing, you know what, I need to delete this and start again, right? I just need to start again. Hey, that's the teleportation. I'm going to simply get reset hard and give it another shot. In fact, just last week on stream, I was programming something and we literally get reset hard and just restarted the change. You know why? Because I was like, dang it, I did a little bit of vibe coding. I did a little bit of this because I was comparing the difference between vibe coding and my hand coding. And I did a little bit too much at once, lost the plot and said, you know what? Get reset hard, try again. I'd like to stress at this point that this is no way the novice's fault. No, so again, I mean, I'm not trying to argue with this article for the sake of arguing. I'm arguing because I think they're both right and wrong. When you say it's not somebody's fault, the reality to life is if you think that cave is interesting and then you keep on going in the cave despite it getting worse and worse and worse, it is your fault. It's definitionally your fault, using the same metaphor. The difference is that you simply were ignorant. It does not mean it's not your fault. You were ignorant of the consequences. And we all, that's like literally part of learning here, right? They followed the same policy as any expert. Take the best action available to you at the time. Telling a novice to just do better is not constructive feedback. This feedback does not lead them to improving over time, since from the only perspective that matters is the scenario, the novices, they were taking the best action available to them. And if you're giving feedback that doesn't lead to improvement, what's the point of the feedback? So often how I find things that actually make it a lot better for me, this is actually how I feel like I get better. We got to stand up for this one, okay? Boys, we are standing up for this one, okay? We're standing up for this one. So I often find that I don't get better, okay? I do not, in fact, get better by simply having someone tell me where I was wrong. No. I personally find that where I get better is that I have to do it wrong, and then I get to see how it's done right. And then I make this weird connection in my brain. It's like, oh, I've never seen a problem from this angle. It's now just like a little thing in my back pocket. It's not that, so the thing, and that's the big thing, is that people, there's a lot of sensitivity in this area. It's okay to be told that what you built is horseshit. It's okay. You should be okay with that. Just be okay with it, okay? It's okay. You're new. Even when you're not new, you still build horseshit. In fact, I would argue that 80% of code is mostly horseshit, and it's okay. We all make bad decisions, okay? Every last one of us. But the thing is that when you get good, what you realize is you can make a decision that's bad. Its rate of decay is less. It can go further. You get more miles out of each one of your trade-offs you make. And that's because you've made enough trade-offs and you've seen your trade-offs fail and you've seen your trade-offs become better And then you go, well, look at that. I could do that again. And then you do it again. And then you do it again. Then you do it again. And you get better and better at identifying the exact same things every single time, which is in fact that there's almost always some sort of method to the madness. And once you start feeling it out, you can write like 50, 60% of your software just one-shotting it, and it's mostly correct. And then you'll be able to go for months on end. And then you go, okay, I've gotten these fundamental bases wrong, and now I'm going to have to pretty much rewrite the software or rewrite large parts of it. But it's not that bad because the problem wasn't the same when you started. When you started, it was simple. People just wanted you to display something out of a database, but it never stays that way. And if you plan too early for everything to change, like a novice, then you write shitty code. And you know what? Experts do this too. This is one of those expert traps that people think that somehow is only exclusive to novices. In fact, I would argue that experts fall into this trap more than anybody else. But you over refactor, or you under factor, or you over engineer, you under engineer. You just do all the same crap every single time. So, do I think it's bad? No. Do I think you need to be told that you've written shitty things? Yeah, sure. Why not? Like, don't be sensitive. Honestly, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Just be okay with it. Like, it's okay. You're wrong, and that's okay. I think something that would help a lot of novices is letting them know it's totally normal to be wrong. Right? It's totally normal to be wrong, and that's most of your journey. There are no experts. Of course there's experts, and that's stupid to say. It's genuinely a dumb thing to say. Unless if what you're saying is that you and John Carmack are the same, right? Like if you're actually saying that, then I think you're delusional. You can get shockingly far by being generally good at tech, right? You can get shockingly far at being good at. You can be an expert in just having a good guess, right? There's like this idea that, yeah, you're right. You probably don't know how to write a database from scratch, but you don't often need to know how to write a database from scratch to be able to use Squeal. And you can kind of gut shot things. Like I can look at a few different interfaces and go, ooh, I like this one. This one's pretty nice, and I like where this is going. And I can look at other ones and go, I don't really like this one. Like that's why I can look at Squeal Lite and see what it offers and go, Squeal Lite, this is a really good choice. I think Squeal Lite is fantastic. The novice has a genius idea. Still lost in the maze, you keep walking. Your friend mentioned the ball of twine, and after thinking for a bit, you realize your woolen jumper, if carefully dismantled, could be a good replacement. Oh, I'm just thinking about chewing on wool. I know that's so strange, but oh my gosh, it's making me feel so uncomfortable. Dutifully, and with a concrete objective, you sit down and begin to unravel your jumper. After an hour or so, you've got your ball of yarn. And after some fail, oh my gosh, I can't stop thinking about like chewing on yarn for whatever reason. Have you ever had one of those things where you just think about like the texture and the squeakiness? Dutifully, with your concrete objective, you sit down and begin to unravel your jumper. After an hour or so, you've got a ball of yarn. After some failed attempts at unspooling the yarn behind you, you realize that one strand of yarn is hopelessly weak. You decide to braid the yarn. You sit down for another hour or so. It's pretty boring, but as you assume that this is just what solving mazes is all about. A bit later, your expert friend calls you up and lambasts you for wasting your time with this yarn business. It was clearly never going to work, he says. He instructs you to use broken branches from the hedge that makes up the maze as the way of marking your path. You hadn't realized the maze was made of hedge until this point. Yeah? Okay, so I don't really quite get this thing. I guess I quite get it. What he's saying is that you find out that there's a better way to do things, but you don't quite understand how to do that better way. So you just spin your gears trying to figure it out. Again, I think this is great. This is great. You should do this. I mean, I did this hopelessly for years. It doesn't work, but the spirit of it works. Yes, the spirit of it works. I think this is good. Like, I do think hopelessly pushing through a maze makes you better the next time you go into a maze. Novices often spend energy fixing things that are orthogonal to the actual problem, orthogonal being developers' favorite word, they want to solve, whereas experts are able to direct their energy towards the problems they want to solve. This leads to novices having an extremely disoriented view of the field because the problems they end up solving are both more difficult and less interesting than those being tackled by experts. Nobody wants to put more effort into figuring out a more boring problem. I also think that this is why AI feels so alluring to people who aren't very good at programming, right? It just feels magical. It feels like you're kind of an expert. Because when you want to do something, it just kind of works. You know what I mean? You're like, wow, that's crazy. I could just like decide something and it worked. It feels magic, right? The novice's search strategy. Finally, with the means of marking the path you've taken, you've set out to traverse the maze, or maybe to escape it. You're still not sure. You stride along, breaking and placing branches as you go. You're not really sure which paths are the best, so you mostly pick at random. For a novice, the vast majority of decisions have to be made essentially randomly, with very little information going into the choice. If all decisions were sequential and did not depend on any other decision, a dedicated novice would come up with a solution better than a random chance after thinking hard about the decision. But the world we live in is fractal and complexly dependent. Many decisions depend on other decisions in ways that novices have no idea about. Even a dedicated novice will be confronted with situations in which they must make several interdependent decisions before they can get feedback on the efficacy of those decisions. The novice is, at first, forced to make completely arbitrary choices and face the consequences. Hopefully, they can learn which consequences were due to which decisions, but this isn't always feasible. Also, okay, I know I'm not trying to harp on AI, nor are we trying to talk any more about AI, but I do have to say one more thing. I've been saying this whole time that I think the maze, the failure of the maze, the learning how to get out of a maze, having valuable feedback from a friend, or perhaps just having valuable feedback from your previous self in a previous maze is all things that make you grow more and more into an expert. I think that we often, as of recent, have been shortcutting this process. And that's always been the thing I've said multiple times, which is that I fear that's my biggest AI fear. It's not that I think programming's go away. It's not that I think it's going to be better than me, which theoretically at some point in the universe it will be better than me. It's not any of that. It's that it's taking away your ability to walk through the maze yourself and understand why you should use a branch at some point or why you should use something else. You're not offloading the things that you understand completely. You are onboarding and having something else solve and just point you down a specific path saying this is the way you do it, and you go, oh, I didn't think about it that way. But you don't realize why they're making that decision. Why was that decision made specifically? And that's kind of like the big thing that is really hard to get out is why was this one path the right one versus other paths? How did it arrive to that conclusion? It's not that the conclusion itself was valuable. It's arriving to that conclusion and being able to bring forth that change is the important part. And so even asking ChatGPT why did it make that decision isn't quite the same, because that means the idea never originated in your head. It originated somewhere else. And so you're like, okay. And so if you're that very fortunate person that can learn just by reading someone else's mistakes, and you can understand in that weird holistic manner that I said I can't, then maybe you can do that, but I've just never been able to do that, right? That's the thing, is that I can't learn from that. The expert knows how to avoid the failure because he's been inside the failure, exactly. And that's one of the honestly, I think one of the hardest parts about coding is actually being able to, your thoughts directly translating into code. And that's it's just a muscle you have to do over and over and over and over again. Effort makes life easier. Yes, effort does make life easier. From the perspective of an expert, the decision taken while solving a problem are often second nature and yet are carefully crafted as to avoid unnecessary trouble down the road. A novice looking upon the expert's work would be hard-pressed to distinguish these few important decisions based on years of hard work and study from the myriad of far less important decisions based largely on personal taste. True. Novice don't even see the decision. You're breezing through the particularly long and straight bit of the maze when your expert friend calls you up and once again says, "Why didn't you take that right a few meters back?" they ask. "There was none," you assert, and glancing behind, you confirm this fact. Just in case you retrace your steps, and sure enough, there's a sliver of a gap in the hedges which you suppose could be a path to take. It's terribly cramped and overgrown compared to the wide, clean paths you've been taking so far, but it is a path. Looking around carefully now, you realize the hedges are actually packed with cracks and gaps and thin spots. Who knows how many paths you've missed? Sometimes the novice doesn't even know that there's a decision to make. When the decision is pointed out by a friendly expert, the novice can often either make the correct decision or appreciate the correct solution when it's shown to them. But the novice didn't even know there was a decision in the first place. This makes it incredibly difficult for the ambitious novice to make progress without outside help. One thing I don't like about this whole thing is that it puts the novice in this constant state of inability and purely a victim by the circumstances, if that makes a sense. They are incapable of making it out themselves. Well, to a degree, that's what it is. I'm not sure if I believe that. What I mean by that is that the novice could not observe that there's cracks in the hedges without being told that there's cracks in the hedges. But then you have to go, okay, well, let's replay that recursively. Does that mean the person who told him that there was cracks in the hedges was also told that there was cracks in the hedges? And then you have to go, okay, well then who told that person? Well, who told that person? Right? It's like the one miracle of science, right? It's the one miracle science makes you have to believe, is that you have to believe that there was some sort of beginning that just came into being. I guess I'm defining a novice as someone who can't figure it out for themselves, but that's not a novice. Like, definitionally, that is not a novice. A novice is not someone who can't figure it out for themselves. A novice is somebody who is inexperienced. That's what we call an idiot. Yes, this was what we would be calling an idiot. Someone that has to be constantly pointed to the next step. I think you can. Like, I think any one of you, like, type 1 in the chat if you actually think yourself as a novice. You're fairly inexperienced. I'd say like 1 to 2 years into learning how to program would be what I would consider in the deeply novice range. I think there's a lot of you. I think there's a lot of you. And I think a lot of you have the vast capability to not be a novice given time and effort. And that time to go from being a novice to being intermediate to being an expert is going to be directly proportional to your desire to not be a novice. Meaning that if you spend 2 hours a day, you're going to grow 2 hours a day. Unironically. If you spend 12 hours a day, you're going to beat the person spending 2 hours a day. I spent a good 80 to 100 hours a week every week for years at first because I wanted it. I wanted it so bad. Like, if I didn't make it, I had to return to I only had my previous life to return to, which was not a place I wanted to be. So I was so motivated by both want and need. And, the 10,000 hour thing is interesting. I'm not sure if 10,000 hours is true or isn't true, right? I don't know exactly how it works in programming, right? But there is something to it. Novices have skill issues. Novices do have skill issues. It's true. That's true. That's because it's not that they have skill issues. They don't have skills yet. Sometimes the novice doesn't even know that there's a decision to make. And when the decision is pointed out by a friendly expert, the novice can often either make the correct decision or appreciate the correct solution when it's shown to them. But the novice didn't even know there was a decision in the first place. This makes it incredibly difficult for the ambitious novice to make progress without outside help. They cannot just check their work for the mistakes because for any substantial body of work, the novice likely won't be able to point out half their decisions. See, it's that the whole, there's like an implicit, like I said, the implicit victim mentality. I'm not a huge lover of. You can squeeze through this gap in the hedge recommended by your expert friend. Before long, you've come to a fork in the maze. One path leads left and the other leads right. The left path looks a bit wider and a bit brighter, but having learned from your mistakes, you decide to call up your expert friend and get their advice and learn from their wisdom. The right path is better, your friend declares. You ask for an explanation, but they are unable to give you anything more specific than the right path is a stronger option. It's clearly got the right look about it. There's no chance it'll let you down. Frustrated at the lack of intelligible wisdom, you take the right path. And sure enough, it looks like it was the correct decision. The path clears up and starts to head towards the exit, as far as you can tell. But you still don't understand what your expert friend saw. And it seems like they don't understand what they saw either. Like there's the whole Euro dreams of sushi thing, and that thing's kind of always stuck with me, which is the people who make rice have to make rice for 3 years before they can move on to other parts of making sushi. And that's because I've used this term hidden knowledge a lot, which is there's the intelligence of something, and then there's the hidden knowledge of it. If you've ever played any sport that requires a bit of finesse, you understand the hidden knowledge much, much better. And so some Greek pointed this out like 2,000 years ago, exactly. And so I played a lot of table tennis. I played an enormous amount of table tennis. And there comes this point where at first you're so focused on just trying to hit it. And when you hit it, you don't quite understand why you're hitting it like this. You're just repeating this motion because this is what you've seen other people do. And then at some point, it almost becomes where you can feel how the ball hits and you know what it's going to do. And then at some point, you can see how the other person hit, and you know that because they put this kind of spin on it, you need to hit it slightly differently than you would hit it. If they put a downward top with a bit of right on it, you know you can almost bitch, give me that money, kind of swing across the face of it and give it this sweet arcing to the side hit because you've felt it so many times, and all of a sudden it's there's this new set of wisdom or new set of knowledge that opens up where when you see someone do something, you know a way to respond, not because, I mean, you could even write a book about it. You could write every single motion you did, but someone couldn't pick up the paddle and just do it because they haven't felt it. They don't feel the spin yet. They don't feel how it feels against the paddle. They can't understand that when they hit it, they understood where they hit it within the paddle and why it is the way it is. Like they can't process those things because they don't have the touch yet. And so there's like this kind of intuition you start to develop. And I'm sure this happens everywhere. I'm trying to learn how to play a little bit of golf. And I want to I can see that there is intuition. I just don't know how to gather it other than playing a whole bunch. This is why coaching is hard. Yes, because there's a whole set of feeling. Table tennis legend Primegen, I did go to China, and I did have a line. I did beat a university team at one point. I got pretty good. I had a whole slew of people lined up outside the door. Started beating regular people, and then the line got to like 100 people, and just was beaten one by one. Did like Olympics set to 11, and it got so fun. And people were just like, one guy was just like, "You American, you can't do this," and I was just like, "Yeah," just slapping. A lot of the people came in holding it with Chinese pick style, and I was still just handshake, and I was just dominating. It was so sweet. It was like the greatest moment of my life. And now I suck at table tennis, but I loved it. I was so good at one point. The expert's intuition is often formidable, but rarely comprehensible. The inability to clearly explain their decisions is what makes it so useful for a novice to spend time with experts. The expertise ensemble. Your expert friend is chastising you for missing the obvious gaps in the hedge, and not for realizing you could climb over hedges, and for not bringing a hedge trimmer, and for the myriad of other choices that you made without even realizing you had the option to do differently. As your eyes glaze over, you hear someone call to your friend through the phone. Turns out your expert friend has an expert friends of their own, and they're all helping each other. I thought I was meant to figure it out on my own, you cry, but your friend asks whatever gave you that idea. To be completely fair, I've learned almost exclusively everything mostly by myself or attempting to read what I can on the internet. The startup I did was long before I ever had a real job. When I went to my first real job, I just jumped in and started just making decisions for them because I thought some of their things were bad, and they liked it, and they said, keep making the decisions. I've never really fallen into the position where I've had a good mentor for coding. Like, there's one guy I can think of that kind of did it, but he was straddling the line between manager and coder, and he didn't find that line good at all, but he did try, and so we kind of did that for a little bit, but I've just mostly lived the life of just solitary, try to learn how to code, right? He's talking about heed race things. You shut up, Pick! You ask how you two can get a network of peers who can help you through the maze. That's a rarity. Just so you know, this is a rarity more than anything else. Your friend says to join some online chat rooms. Unfortunately for you, they're all speaking incomprehensible jargon or debating optimal twine spooling techniques. Experts often either have a network of people. By the way, if you do join my Discord, I don't know if you're going to get people talking about expert twine optimal debating. They can quickly distinguish useful insights from helplessly generic summaries and don't have to spend much time looking for the information they are after. But novices have no clue about how to distinguish the two, nor how to find the communities who can help them effectively. Eventually, you finish the maze, not wanting to repeat the experience of being a complete novice, and you dedicate yourself to learning more and to not failing ill to the traps of being a novice. But how exactly should you do that? As a novice, you need to find a sympathetic expert on your side to help you out and to whom you can ask all questions, regardless of how trivial the questions might be. I do think if you can find someone that will help you become better, it's probably better. But can I make an argument? Can I make a counter argument to that? If you can't identify how to solve problems well, who says you can identify an expert that is worth listening to? Checkmate, atheist. Why don't you go tip that fedora somewhere else, Reddit tier atheism? I just owned you with facts, logic, and theology. Anyways, a replacement for this finding a lot of experts so you can spread the load amongst them. What? You could go very far online nowadays, and even more so with AI tools. But many of the above trappings that novices succumb to do not magically disintegrate because you have access to the internet or to a chatbot. You still don't know how to recognize the subtle decisions. You still don't know how to distinguish good ideas from bad. You still don't know how to avoid long-term cascading or cascades due to bad choices. The internet helps, for sure, but having someone by your side is monumentally better. And I would also argue that, I would argue the cascading of bad decisions is just not something you can avoid. It's just simply something that you make it a longer path until it cascades into bad decisions. Like, that's all it is. Also, something that I think is kind of being missing here, which is origin of idea. I know I kind of alluded to this earlier. If you cannot originate the idea, meaning that you can apply what you've previously learned, you haven't learned something yet. If you need to continuously keep on getting help or getting guidance, you're not applying what you previously learned. You need to be able to originate that. That's like a good first step, is that you start taking your originations, apply them, find where they're weak, re-originate the idea, apply it, and see where it's weak, see where it cascades. One thing that can be tricky to convey to your friendly expert is that sometimes you just need to be able to show them what you're doing without any specific question in mind. And I often found that I can feel uneasy about what I'm doing, and then talking with an expert friend will quickly surface that I've made some error that will cause pain later. Having someone who's happy to spend time just talking without any specific goal to solve will go a long way. Yeah, there's I have this somewhere on my channel where I did a talk with Casey Muratori about just like how to go about game design. And that was super helpful. And he just told me like, hey, here's some things he would do. And it was just like great for me. I applied everything he said and I didn't know how to apply it. And I had to kind of like reapply it a few times. But it was honestly a really great like way to do something. And now I just like I keep it in my head. All right, let's see. In the workplace, this style of just talking interaction between novices and experts is critical for knowledge transfer and training, but novices rarely have a voice with key decision makers. And so promoting these interactions is often neglected. It is not sufficient to instruct senior employees to answer the newcomers' questions, since the vast majority of learning comes from novice watching how the expert applies their skills. I think that's supposed to be applies, and not from direct questions and answers. What makes the scenario even trickier is that the experts will likely think just talking interactions are basically worthless, but answering concrete questions feel much more useful. The novice, on the other hand, could likely discover answers to concrete questions on their own, given enough time, but developing the intuition that comes through while an expert is just talking with a novice is incredibly valuable to the novice. This explains the difficulty of training new employees when all your experts are working remotely, as remote work practically eliminates that sort of casual, unguided water cooler interaction. I actually fully agree with this. By the way, there is something just that's different about in person. I think you can learn more. And I do think that the people that get affected the most by remote work are inexperienced people, because the barrier to reaching out is higher. I think it's harder to get in front of somebody. I think there's a lot to it that is most certainly not stated. I'm not saying remote work is bad. I think there's a lot of good parts to remote work. I've remote worked at Netflix for the last 4 years of Netflix. I'm not saying it's like a horrible thing, but I could definitely tell I also missed out on a lot of just stuff that's hard to say. I just wasn't as effective. I was still pretty effective. It just wasn't quite the same. Netflix, by the way, if you're wondering, as Netflix, by the way, in case you're wondering, just in case. Something you can independently, and possibly it's the best done without expert supervision, as exploration of the field. You know nothing and have no basis about what may or may not be useful. Anytime you've come across something that feels like it has some depth to it, such as well-written essay series or a deep technical dive, you need to invest heavily into it. As a novice, your one advantage is that everything is new and nobody expects you to be fast. Because of this, you can afford to spend time to learn as much as possible. By the way, I love this. Take advantage of this every single job you go to. Every single time. This is so good. I honestly don't think it's possible to overdo this. Spending a week exploring some specific arcana of your field is probably going to pay dividends because all of a sudden you're expert level in this tiny aspect of the field. You can go head to head with an expert. Okay. Maybe that's a little overstated. If you can spend a week and you can become an expert, you're either learning something that's exceptionally shallow or the experts are idiots. I'm just throwing it out there. Low expectations are your advantage, absolutely. Or the field is 1 week old. Also true. Since they last read about the weird subdomain 5 years ago, don't study the common things and go all in on a niche pockets. The common things are common enough that you learn them through osmosis regardless of what your main activity is. But the niche things require active study, and ignoring the niches is how you remain a novice. Very good. Also, it's the specialty of a generalist is to know how far into the niche you delve. Right? Very, very important. Amongst all of this, the novice needs courage to make decisions without knowing the consequences and confidence so that they wholeheartedly commit to their decisions and grant them the greatest chance of success. These traits are not trivial, and confidence can easily be crushed by a snide comment from an expert. I don't want to imagine how many promising novices have been spurned by unimpressive experts. In this way, advice from a soul-hearted expert is worse than no expert advice due to all the risk of destroying the novice's confidence. By the way, I'm giving every person that has this inability to be able to live their own life without someone just crushing them. I'm giving you the permission right now to stop it. Stop it. Okay? Seriously, stop letting one person destroy you because you think them an expert. This is just the strangest part of life, is that there is always a group of people who, once unencouraged, remain unencouraged. Don't let that happen. Like, you know, I always had this thing where I would complain with, I went back and forth with who maybe still is, but he was like the vice president of inclusion diversity at Netflix. I used to go back and forth with him talking about all, like, just interesting problems. He was a fun guy to talk to. I actually had a lot of fun talking to the guy. And one time he was telling me the difference between diversity and inclusion is diversity is inviting people to the dance and inclusion is getting asked to dance. And so I said, I think he's fundamentally wrong. I think that he's wrong on both aspects to that. And I said the single most important thing is that nobody gets asked to dance. If you want to be included, you have to ask to dance. And if you think and you wait for somebody else to be the one that rescues you and brings you in, you are going to wait on the sidelines for the rest of your life. And it is stupid to sit there and wait. Like, don't wait for someone else to open the door. You take your foot, you first place it behind you, you harden your core and swing with all of your might, and you kick the effing door down, okay? Stop being a bitch and just toughen up. You got to do it, because or else you're going to wait to be asked to dance. You know why? Because the reality is that nobody's inclusive, okay? People like being around people that are like them. Like, this is a common human experience in every society. And they will stop. People will not invite you in. This happens over and over and over and over again. People don't invite other people in. This is like a common, normal thing. And when people are like, oh, I only hang out with people with different opinions, it's a group of people being like, we only hang around with people with different opinions. We're so unique. Okay, sure you are. There's very few people that somehow can floss that line, because these worlds don't really exist. They don't. I want them to exist, but they don't. They're hard. But I mean that in the nicest possible way, which is that it's extremely difficult to be a part of a group. And I know people are going to tell you that everything should be nice in the real world. It's not nice. You got to ask to dance. If you're not willing to make that, it's going to be really hard for you to get into any group. You have to network. You have to take the active stance in your life. And when someone tells you you can't, there's kind of like a few different ways you can kind of approach that. Some people, when they hear that, they just stop trying. There's some people that when they hear that, they take that and use it as like anger, or I'm going to prove that person wrong. Or there's some people that hear that and they're not motivated to prove the person wrong. They're just more motivated that they can do something, that someone can't, like, that I'm not here to prove somebody wrong. I believe that I can. And I want to believe in myself. And I do think the third version is the best version, which means I'm not here to just simply be someone that's always fighting against somebody else. I'm somebody that's fighting against myself, always trying to be the better version. And when someone says it's not possible, I'm going to say, I can. I can do that, right? And so I try to always have that in my head, which is that I want to be the person who, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. When everyone says, hey, you're really good at this, I want to go, okay, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. When someone says you're really bad at this, I go, hey, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I'm going to constantly try to go after what I want to go after. I just had a deep realization that I don't include myself in groups even when I want to. Reason, I feel like sometimes I would be intruding in their space and make them feel uncomfortable. Yeah, and maybe you do. But just like everything else, just like this entire article talks about more on the technical set of skills, this is why I'm like 98% sure that most people that call themselves neurodivergent are literally people who don't practice social skills and then wonder why they're bad at it. The first time you join a group, you're just not good at it. This is normal. There's nothing weird about that. You're weird because you've never done it. Just like you're not good at programming because you've never done it. Like, that's it. That's not a bad thing. That's a normal, that's just a standard world thing. And if here's the thing is that you could be a very sociable person at one point in your life and then later on stop doing it for years and then realize you're not good at it anymore. It's just like everything else. I'm no longer good at table tennis. Not because I'm like some unique human that got bad over time. No, I got bad over time because I'm like every other human. You know, it does make life harder. When all you ever do is communicate via text, it makes it harder to have an in-person conversation. Right? It just does. By the very definition of that. Right? It's a prime with the it's all in your head argument. That's a lot of life is it's all in your head. Now, I mean, I have some real friends who actually have real, like, that are real neurodivergent, and they're at a clear disadvantage in life. Right? They're at a clear disadvantage, and they have to go through a lot more to do stuff. I'm talking about the 98% of Twitter people that have the word neurodivergent in it, and that's because they're just socially awkward. They're like, I have autism. I'm just awkward. You're like, you're not awkward, dog. You're not awkward. You're unpracticed. And there's a huge difference between the two. Okay? Stop confusing someone's like really hard life situation with you being awkward. All right, anyways. Sorry, I went on a weird tangent just there. The downside to this mindset is that it's easy to disregard other people's hardships because it starts to look like everyone's at their own fault if they ever fail. So I think the thing you're confusing is very, very simple and very, very straightforward. And I'm glad you said that. So let me just try to Uno reverse you just a little bit, okay? The thing is that you obviously can't control every circumstances. Sometimes funding runs out and you can no longer work on it. And maybe you did fail the company in some aspects, but also you just weren't given enough time to solve the product. Maybe there was people that truly were jerks and you're not just the jerk thinking everyone's a jerk, and that's that, right? There could be a whole set of situations that failure was outside of your control. Absolutely. But if for any reason you look at those things and think, failure was out of my control, I think that mentality is in fact 100 times more dangerous than whatever you are trying to protect against. This kind of feels like that whole, like, it's this overprotective, over-coddling idea that, oh, we better not let people feel these certain things because if you do, my gosh, they could use it as a weapon to like be mean to somebody else. And you're just like, true, but that's not what anybody was saying. Self-accountability is extremely important, and I think you should always be as accountable as possible. In fact, I think it's better to be over-accountable than under-accountable. And at the end of the day, if you take your measurement stick and you use it as a means to beat somebody else, you will quickly realize, or you'll die a loser, you'll realize that you, in fact, don't even live up to your own measurement stick. And that you often fail from it as well. And so, no, I don't care if somebody uses this as a jumping board or a springboard to become a jerk, because yes, that's going to happen no matter what you do. But it's 1,000 times worse for people not to constantly strive after their own self-accountability. I am 1,000 times more willing to bet on the self-accountability than I am to be careful of somebody else's feelings, right? Because we all have the jerk inside of us. And if we do the opposite of everything I say, there will still be a jerk on the other side. There's always a jerk. There's a jerk in all situations. There's a reason why it says good, like hell is paved with good intentions, is it has nothing, like, it's actually a pretty good phrase. I normally hate a lot of these phrases. I think hell's also paved. Obviously, the path to hell is also paved with a lot of bad decisions and all that. But regardless of all those things, there's also a lot of, there's also a lot of just things you attempt to do good that end up being bad. And it's not that you're like, like that time you could have said something that would have changed somebody, or you would have called out somebody for doing something that you really didn't like, but instead you would rather be kind of nice. And you're like, you know what? I'd rather be a nice guy to this person. Maybe they're a little bit down, and maybe we just don't need to say these things to this person, so you never say anything. And then that person goes on and continues to make that mistake. Were you better or worse to that person? Well, it's an impossible question to answer. But at the exact same time, you could have very well been worse to that person. You, with good intentions, could have made somebody's life worse. They have to go learn from their mistake again. The lack of consistent empathy between experts and novices would suggest that, despite feeling easy, it is in fact difficult. I've written more about this here. In the extreme case, the lack of empathy leads to experts deriding the work of novices as not having the prestige class taste status expressed so deftly by the work of the experts. This is self-fulfilling. Novices will either conform to the expert's sense of aesthetics, dismiss the field of study as not for them, or in rare cases, work incredibly hard to prove experts wrong after all. And in this last case, the novice becomes an expert anyway. Experts tend to have an aesthetic preference towards technically challenging work rather than simple but interesting work. And I've written more about this phenomenon as experts' aesthetics. That's interesting. I like this closing thought. I think there's probably a little bit more. As I said, you don't have to prove people wrong. Sometimes you just want to become better. Right? When someone says that they've been dismissed, their goal isn't to prove somebody wrong, but I want to be better. And that can be, that can be motivating. That can be motivating for some amount of people. Anyways, this hasn't been my experience with most experts. A lot of the ones I've encountered are humble and curious. Yeah, I mean, I think that you're a lucky person. I think some people have had some bad ones. Glad it gave some food for thought. No, it was great. This was a great article. I enjoyed this article quite a bit. I think there's a lot to this, and there's a lot to talk about. But my big worry, the biggest worry I have is I don't want any novice to ever consider themselves helpless and only a victim to what the expertness of an expert. I think that it's really comes down to I think that the fastest way to avoid being a novice is just hard work. And you know what? If no one can tell you you're right or wrong, I'm going to give you a little secret. The thing that you write and the code you produce will eventually tell you if you're right or wrong. It will, because you will find yourself having this exceptionally hard time adding more things to it. And you're like, why is everything falling apart? It started off so easy. And now it's like when I add something, it's so hard. What have I done? Try to learn from that. Can you take something out and rework it to make it easier? Code never lies. Code never lies. Ever. It does exactly what you say it should do. And when it doesn't work, guess what? That's because you're bad at it. When it doesn't do what you want to do. Race conditions are a lie. False. Race conditions are a truth that you created. Right? You created that condition. And now you get to deal with the consequences. Dude, threading race conditions are just like the worst data races. Whew. Do you think we came up with programming without the internet like this? No easy answers? Yeah, I mean, I started to learn how to program before there was Stack Overflow. And so I think the thing is, by the way, I love lies, damned lies, and statistics, LLMs. I love that answer. But seriously, I do think there is probably something to that. When you had to learn and there was no Stack Overflow, what do? There's a lot of people that can't even imagine a world without a quick Google search. Books, yeah, I mean, I used to have to program a bunch of Java. And you know what I had to do? Read the Java docs, right? Just keep on reading docs until you just magically find something. Because, one thing that was really hard is I didn't even know the word tokenizer was what people used. So I just started looking up the word string over, looking through all the string. Oh, tokenizer? What's a token? You have to just sit there and just read the entire doc. I read so much Java 1.6. Dude, it was insane. It was actually insane. All right. Anyways, all right. This was great. The name is you know what? Don't ever think you're done learning again. Yeah, that's a good ending. I'm happy with that ending. Bye.